They revised the personality, and after 2 years, Bonanza reached to the second position. However, Greene's battle didn't stop there. He and Purnell had an argument. Robert so severely that the crew had to separate them. He quarreled with Michael Landon regarding the program. Additionally, Don Blocker's death in 1972, according to Greene, show ought to have concluded 6 seasons prior. What actually took place in the background? The reality is more sinister than the repeats ever were appeared. The birth of Lion Hayman Greene occurred on February 12, 1915. It was Canada experienced one of its coldest winters. Never observed. The temperature fell to 40 degrees. Daniel Greene, his father, had escaped from Russia after fleeing in 1902, assaults on Jews that are violent. He operated a small shoe repair business and earned only $8 a week in the conflict. The entire family crammed into a two-room flat at Clarence Street, 127. There were 6 survivors, among them Lion's grandparents included. They didn't use any English at all. The Lion slept on a flour sack-made bed, filled with newspapers. 1918 saw that the city was hit by Spanish flu and 200 people were slain in Ottawa alone. Lion, age 3, became very ill, with everyone assumed he wouldn't get pneumonia. However, his grandma forced him to consume honey and raw garlic once per hour. For several weeks he managed to survive somehow. His Dora, her mother, worked 14 hours a day in a factory, making only 15 cents every hour. She brought home tattered at night. She discovered newspapers in wealthy localities. She taught with them. Lion's literacy and belief in education would spare him a life of destitution. Lion was 7 years old on March 15, 1922. Once more his life was altered. At precisely 2:47, his father's cobbler in the afternoon, the store caught fire. Mixed bad wiring with odors from shoe polish and arranged the $400 worth of equipment and tools, which would be approximately $6,000 in today's currency. Daniel hardly served. He had terrible hands. Burnt while attempting to rescue his tools. They lacked insurance. He was still in debt by $200 rent. They were forced to leave and ultimately residing in the Hebrews' basement, Chapel Street Benevolent Society. 12. It was packed with families. The Lion continued to sleep on an outdated army cut and began to have a screaming and fire-related nightmares. There are scars from that fire. He was terrified as a child of debt and didn't want to depend only on a single job. In Hollywood, years later, that fear influenced his financial decisions and steered clear of hazardous investments. Daniel ultimately, I obtained a $50 loan from the Jewish Loan Society and established a more compact store, but the family didn't return to where they were. Lion never forgot that loss. By 1928, Lion was 13 years old and enrolled in Lisgar Collegiate. That autumn, he was cast as the school's third tree. The Enchanted Forest is a play. He had only 2 lines, yet he chose to stand on stage and spoke for 5 minutes, making fun of the dishonest city council in Ottawa. The crowd paused, then erupted in giggling. He made a joke about the mayor buying Yvonne Bad, then Rottenwood. Brought up the $10,000 controversy concerning Frank Plant. Mayor, 3 members of the board rushed out, and the wife of the mayor called for Lion to be expelled from school. He received a 1-week suspension, although the theatrical instructor drew him aside and explained he was quite talented that evening. Taught him 2 things. He first fell in love with performance's power. Secondly, speaking politics could be risky. To brazenly, Lion was 16 years old in 1931. The effects of the Great Depression were severe. The unemployment rate in Canada was 27%. Lion began going to landfills and junkyards to gather damaged cables and tubes. He intended to construct a radio using $2.75, avoided having to deliver newspapers and 80 sign based on well-known mechanics. He constructed a super heterodyne with 5 tubes. Radio in the coal cellar of his family. His father forbade him from using the Lion operated by candlelight because of this. The radio received stations from Pittsburgh and Chicago. When his mom, she shattered it when she heard him listening. A rolling pin. According to her, performances were worse than circus performers. Still resentful regarding a relative who didn't succeed in entertainment industry. However, Lion simply rebuilt it and continued to practice in the neighbor's garage, every night between midnight and 2 in the morning. He turned the headlines of newspapers into a handmade microphone. That radio turned into his getaway. Lion received his degree in June 1933. High school, the unemployment rate in Canada hit 30%. He was given $15 per week by his uncle employment at the Imperial Bank, although Lion rejected it. Rather, he signed up 4th Ottawa Little Theatre's acting school theater. The monthly tuition was $8. He had just $23 was saved. His dad blew up in Ridge. Their fighting was so noisy that the cops were contacted by neighbors. But Lion took Lorne's name after reading about the River Lorne in Scotland, attempting to construct a new persona. The cost of his first semester was paid with his father's gold pocket as collateral, fissure that lasted for 3 years in the household. However, Lorne had made his decision. Lorne Greene joined CBC in 1939. Toronto Radio. He was 24. He had just returned from the neighborhood of New York A Playhouse. He soon rose to become the primary national news source. He even created a useful reverse stopwatch. time is monitored by announcers during living parts. He was referred to as the Canadian voice. However, when World War E began and he started reading casualty reports, that moniker became gloomy. His "the worst" was delivered in a deep, solemn voice. News to households nationwide. As over 45,000 Canadian soldiers lost their lives, his voice came to represent death. People began referring to him as the voice of gloom. He felt the weight of it. It was excessive sorrow every night. Finally, he joined the Royal Canadian after leaving CBC Air Force. He was a broadcaster roles, narrating documentaries on warlike Churchills and fighting Norway Sland. That final one even took home an Academy Award. However, following the war, Quebec attempted to cut his outsider profits. He declined. He left the staff employment and started working as a freelancer. By 1945, in Toronto, Lorne had started a school known as the Radio Arts Academy. Up till 1905 it didn't bring him much money, but he wished to assist others. One of his Leslie Nielsen and Mayer were students. He learned both announcing and taking action. He poured all of his resources into it. Lorne was a co-founder of the Toronto's Jupiter Theatre. It continued until 1954. Among the 15 plays they presented were 4 composed by Canadians. It was included in Lorne's larger goal is to construct something that is specific to Canada. The theatre didn't endure, yet it influenced Canada's national artistic voice. In 1952, Lorne relocated to Hollywood at 37 years old. He had received $200 a day at CBC Week. He began his career in Hollywood from scratch. His drama cost $3,000. Funding from the Canadian admonition, but his rich voice made, according to casting directors, he would not accept typecasting. He was given a break when Orson Welles hired him speak on a television program. Lorne nevertheless paid $500 for voice coaching to make his accent sound more natural. He accepted a contentious position in 1953, telling the story of the Heart of Time, a nuclear testing documentary. However, when he learned that the state had clipped video displaying abnormalities in creatures, he left the project and forfeited his $500 compensate. He had to do additional work because of that choice, but won him admiration from anti-nuclear groups. Warner Brothers Provided gave him a contract worth $15,000 in tight. He broke his nose in the crime movie spot, performing his own tricks. He continued to record, refusing to take pain medication. That position was earned. Show him respect. The film earned $1.2 million. He bequeathed a $25,000 in 1956 soap opera agreement to participate in AA science fiction radio show named The Garrick Powers Story. Only paid $300 for each episode. He acted as a scientist's warning listeners regarding radiation. The part demonstrated his increasing worry about their surroundings. He even conducted studies at UCLA to confirm that his information waste. Through the show only ran 4 to 6 episodes, but it made him more visible to Leonis and other scientists and activists. Spaulding. He attempted to begin his Lorne Greene's own production from businesses. He contributed $15,000 of his funds to create a documentary discussing the 1812 war. $50,000 was required for the project. He needed to sell his $16,000 for a Burbank house, despite paying $18,000 for it 3 years prior. That setback was devastating. His Hollywood had been defined by the house. Arrival. That lesson stayed with him forever, about contracts. Later on in he made sure to include the Bonanza years provisions for creativity and profit share. All the chances he had taken. All he had discovered that every radio constructed every phrase that is whispered in the suffering. All of which helped to mold the man he would surely appear on screen. Additionally, the world was so good to meet him at last. Prior to anyone who heard his voice on TV. Early in the 1940s, Lorne Greene spoke in a thick Canadian voice. Radios nearly every evening. He didn't provide amusement. He brought war. Between 1940 and 1945, he recited the names of fallen warriors, provided information on fort, and informed others about defeats abroad. He spoke in a soothing yet strong tone, and it caused families to become immobile. They dubbed him the Doomsday Voice. Some even shut off the radio as soon as he arrived, too scared to find out whether their son or brother came next. More than 2 million every night. Canadians listened. He was more than a voice. He was the voice of heartache. In this period, he was additionally acting as a flying officer within the Canadian Air Force Royale. He had to wear 2 outfits, one for combat and another for radio, and both had a significant impact on his Years later, he acknowledged that he had nightmares about broadcasts. In 1945, Lorne attempted to make something less heavy. He created a novel type of backward-running stopwatch that was helpful. Radio hosts are aware of their time constraints. Left. It became the norm for the studio. He opened the funds from that invention. A Toronto school known as the Lorne Radio Arts Green Academy. Starting in 1945, it trained 381 students till 1952. Almost 90% of them were hired. Broadcasting. Leslie was one of 2 of them, James Ducan and Nielsen, both of whom would turn into celebrities. However, Lorne was excellent at instructing, not at managing a company. He overspent on the structure and the apparatus. In 1952, the school moved to Brook. He needed to close it, sell fee construction, and make use of what was left to go to Hollywood. That move nearly desperate. He was not welcomed in Hollywood. With arms wide open. Between 1952 and 1959, Hugh was repeatedly informed that his tone of the speaker was excessively solemn. Directors stated that Hugh was too rigid for humor or romanticism. Hindley received stern or fatherly parts. He appeared in barely 12 TV shows in 7 years. 4 films and television series. It barely made a profit. The invoices. He performed voiceovers. Attempt to preserve food under false pretenses on the table. He was prepared by 1957. Tour assigned, but his spouse persuaded him to stay another year. That additional year brought about a change. Everything. In 1958, his appearance on Studio One's live TV attracted the attention of the producer of Bonanza. That made Theodore, although the swing was not wide, correct prior to the 1958 hiatus. He took a little role beside Ulay in the Buccaneer Charlton H. and Briner during swirled sursing. He suffered a severe cut in Thelig where a little artery was severed. 23 stitches were required. When filming he concealed the damage for weeks. He self-bandaged it and proceeded, without limping, and continued to struggle despite the agony. Twice the wound reopened, and he had to receive covert medical care at a neighboring. His doctor and wife were the only ones who were aware of its severity. He almost died from the virus. Next, he received an opportunity in 1959 for a part in a new Bonanza is a Western television series. At 44, Hugh was informed that he could decide whether to play the oldest son or the father. He inquired Leslie Nielsen, his former pupil, forgot. Leslie instructed him to play. He will be the focal point of the narrative. Lorne played Ben Cartwright and agreed to a 7-year contract at $20,500 each episode. The program would air Inkler, which was uncommon in those days, on September 12th. Bonanza made its debut. 1959. Although it didn't blow out immediately, Lorne was transforming it already from the within. Just 16 episodes later, Lorne voted to resign. Ben, he said, Cartwright struck me as superficial and aloof. He desired for the scripts to display the character as more genuine. A father figure, not just a gun-wielding dude. Then, the program came in at number 45. Risk of cancellation. However, the authors paid attention. By the 13th episode, Dabin was rewritten to be wiser and friendlier, that the program wasn't saved by change alone. He turned as the center of Bonanza's life. In 1961, the numbers surged to number 2. Prior to the show's premiere, peak issues began on the set. Lorne had a heated argument with Pernell Roberts. Played his son. Pernell believed Lorne tried to exert control and behave like a boss. Excessively. They quarreled frequently, occasionally shouting so loudly that the producers had to move. For Lorne, he was a leader. He was viewed by Pernell as a tyrant. They disagreed on nearly anything. By 1964, Lorne's earnings per episode were $2,500, plus additional compensation as a consultant. Pernell's base pay was the same, but that made the gap wider. When after 202, Pernell quit the program in 1965. Michael Landon jokingly said, "We took taking a cue from the dinner table and divide the take 3 ways rather than." Lorne's demand for reform arrived from a deeper source. He had also witnessed lots of war. Episode 13 of the first season, he questioned the producer about why are we pointing a gun at people all the time. Hesitate. The Cartwrights ought to provide compassion before aggression. That tiny the tone of the show was altered by a comment. The Bonanza gained notoriety for its moral teachings, yet merely shootouts. It addressed racism, dignity, and fairness. That was all. It's Lorne's fault. His personal history throughout the conflictants put him to strive for greater things. By his pay in 1961 was $10,000 per. However, nobody was aware that he discreetly donated 20% of that, around $2,000 for each show, to support the Canadian War. He carried out this covert action for you. The IRS just discovered it during tax season. In the 1970s audits, he had lost his own brother during the pandemic in 1918 and had witnessed Europe had an excessive number of orphans during the. By 1973, when Bonanza came to a close, he had given more than $400,000. Today, that amounts to around $2.8 million. He directed his debut episode in season 4. It aired and was named War Wagon. In the season of 1962 to 1963, when Bonanza was placed 4th. He revised a scenario in which Dan Blocker makes a statement regarding the well-being of animals. That didn't sit nicely with a few members of the stunt team who protested by leaving the set. Lorne remained steadfast, even if it caused it more difficult behind the scenes. In 1964, he had lines about personal lives, although he had an affair while filming on location. The tabloids made it. When Hay had been Rita Haynes' spouse from 1938, followed by the birth of twins in 1944, the revelation of the romance stunt has. Ringo, his song, recently became popular. December 5, 1964. Moderator Onion remained on top of the Simplexic's week listening chart. The guilt reached him. He contributed to an episode's writing. Centered on family principles, attempting to repair his reputation while addressing personal apologies. Ringo's song had been an unexpected success. A lot of youthful consumers believed it to be about Ringo Starr. It wasn't. Lorne, however, continued to make her way around royalties of $500,000. He provided that funds for anti-nuclear initiatives. He had, together with the National Film Board of Canada, at DUI Wharton, and possessed powerful opinions regarding nuclear weapons. He even sent letters to senators in the U.S. requesting modifications to the policy. He was aware of that type of activism can reduce his appeal with the conservative viewers of Bonanza. He did that. By 1966, a new war was in the making, this time alongside Michael Landon. Landon desired more than show's romantic tales to appeal to younger admirers. Lorne disliked the trashy distraction, he said. When Landon began overseeing his own episodes, it produced two distinct ideas for the show. It grew silent. Battle behind the scenes. Purnell had already departed, and Lorne discovered he got into a quarrel with another son. Character on the scene. The strain weighs. However, despite that stress, he moved the show along. Season 7. He helped produce episodes that addressed the wish that deal directly with prejudice. He ensured that Native Americans were included in the game. By actors from the Native culture. Hate mail was sent to him for it. However, the NRCP took note that he was commended for breaking old stereotypes. Bonanza made use of its enormous platform. It remained among the top 5 shows to discuss actual problems. That was Lorne's fault. Lorne Greene had already established as a household name through Thine 1973. But Bonanza came to an end. He portrayed Ben Cartwright for 14 years. The powerful role model in one of the most popular television westerns ever produced. However, in 1978, when he was 63, something unexpected occurred. He went into science fiction. He was cast that year as the Battlestar Commander. It was more than just a new position. It was a radical change in his professional life.